I'd like to return to the topic of God. And just for the record, I'm well aware that I'm off the subject of the Wingmakers, but I can't resist talking about these things. Okay?
It's fine with me. I'll discuss any topic you choose.
You explained earlier that to you, God is a force, but is it the force?
Do you mean is God plural or singular?
Yes.
God is both.
Both.
God is found everywhere because it's the unification force, but paradoxically, being the unification force, it is also unique or singular. Physicists will explain to you that there are four primary forces at play in the universe: strong nuclear, weak nuclear, gravity, and electromagnetic. These forces are actually facets of a singular force, more primal and absolutely causative. Einstein worked nearly 30 years trying to prove this with his unification theory, but never found his answers. No one supposedly has. I can only report that the Labyrinth group, using its LERM technology, has discovered this force. And this force possesses an unmistakable consciousness. That is, it is neither chaos nor order. It is both, and flows between the two worlds of chaos and order like a sine wave flows between positive and negative amplitude.
And can our physicists prove or disprove this?
No, our physicists cannot prove or disprove what I say. They're too shackled in specialized theories that are in crisis.
What kind of theories?
Like quantum mechanics, to name one example. Nearly all physicists, regardless of their specialty, would stand before you in all sincerity, and advise you that quantum mechanics is the correct and complete theory underlying our understanding of the universe. But it doesn't honor the consciousness of a particle, and it has no way of detecting the infinitesimal magnetic fields within which these particles reside.
Why?
This is not a layperson's topic, Sarah. I don't know how to explain this in words you'll understand. It has to do with the fact that our physicists in academia lack sophisticated force amplification technology that can detect the extraordinarily tiny magnetic fields that subatomic particles nest within, which in turn creates an interconnected web of thought circuits. These thought circuits taken collectively represent the exterior structure of the unification force, and they permeate the multiverse. The magnetic fields represent the interior of the unification force, and they permeate the form's formless consciousness.
Okay, I get your point about it not being a layperson's topic. You've completely lost me in the abstract nature of this discussion. I thought we were talking about God, and now I'm not sure what we're talking about.
Keep focused on the primal force. God has decelerated itself to display its physical embodiment in the four known forces I spoke of earlier.
So, this is truly how the universe works, and I should just accept it?
No. I don't want to leave you with the impression that what I've said is the way the multiverse works. If there's one truth I can state unequivocally, it's that my understanding of the multiverse, while constrained with the tools of particle physics, cosmology, and mathematics, is partial at best, and completely inaccurate at worst.
Well, that leaves us essentially nowhere, doesn't it? If what you've said tonight is just partial understanding or complete misjudgment, where does that leave our brightest scientists and theologians? You have all the advantages of advanced technology and alien cosmology, and still you can't explain the universe with any confidence. Even with your proof of God, you claim to know essentially nothing that's absolutely true. How can that be?
No one who's invested in astronomy, cosmology, or physics likes to think that their discipline is misguided by false or incomplete assumptions. But they are. And there's a good reason.
Which is?
Imagine that the observable universe is the middle rung on a ladder of unknown length. Each of the rungs above and below our observable universe represents an order of magnitude beyond our senses. For example, let's say that the rung above the one that represents our observable universe is the outer perimeter of our Milky Way galaxy. Using a telescope we can see the next rung above us, but the rest of the ladder is lost in a thick haze. Looking downward at a microscopic level with an electron microscope we can add another rung below our observable universe, and with a particle accelerator, we can even theorize what the next rung below that might be, but the rest of the ladder trails downward into a thick haze no different than when we try to look up. With all of our technology and theory, we still have no idea how tall the ladder is or even whether the ladder is straight or begins to curve like a double helix. We don't know if perhaps the top end of the ladder curves to such a degree that it actually connects with the bottom end of the ladder. And we don't even know whether there might be additional ladders.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with this. But then why does it always seem that science knows more than they really do?
The largest population of the planet, perhaps 99%, has no experience beyond the middle rung of the ladder. And those that are privileged to observe the next rung above or below by the use of technology, falsely assume, or perhaps hope, that the ladder retains the same form and holds to the same principles. The ACO has observed another rung of this ladder beyond the technology of academia. Nothing more. However, in doing so, we've only become humbled by the depth and breadth of our ignorance. We've learned that the ladder does change. It begins to modify its form, and we theorize that its shape is no longer predictable or even stable.
So doesn't that mean that our physics is wrong?
I like the way an obscure writer, by the name of Gustav Necke, put it: whenever knowledge takes a step forward, God recedes a step backwards. Each rung of the ladder may require a different physics or set of laws and instruments. Is the Neanderthal wrong in the face of the modern human? He was merely a precursor or early prototype. And this is the same as physics or cosmology. It must be understood as a valid prototype that has its purpose in time, but will ultimately be displaced by a new model that encompasses more rungs of the ladder.
It's still hard to imagine how all this technological advantage that the ACO wields could only make clear how little we know about our universe. It doesn't leave much hope for us.
How do you mean that?
Well, it seems to me that if we don't know what we don't know, we're doomed to make assumptions about things that are taken as fact, when in reality, it's just opinion. In this regard, science is no better than religion. Right?
The interesting thing about science is that origins reveal how things work. If you can follow particles to their origins, you can understand how inner space works. If you can follow the cosmic particles, galaxies, quasars, and black holes to their origins, you can understand how outer space works. When you put the two halves together within between space, or the observable universe, you can understand how the whole multiverse works. The problem is that no one has the lens or technology to observe the origins. And this is where theory takes over. The difference between science and religion is that science applies theory while religion applies faith. Both theory and faith, however, fall short of revealing origins. So in this regard, they're similar.
But if what you're saying is true, then we live in a world we don't really understand.
Exactly.
If we don't understand our world, and science and religion are inadequate, where do we turn? I mean, how are we supposed to cope with our ignorance?
The danger of ignorance is only in believing that you're not ignorant. If you know that you lack insight into the inner dimensions of how things work, you know that you have blind spots. You can keep a wary eye open for any advantage that enables a deeper insight or more profound sense of meaning. You have to learn to live with incompleteness and use it as a motivating force rather than a point of desperation or indifference. As far as where do we turn? That's a hard question to answer. It's the reason that all the dramas have become packaged and sold via the media. The media is where most people turn. They flick on their televisions, radios, computers, newspapers, magazines, and even books, and these deliver the packets of information bundled together by the media. The media know very well that people are ignorant enough so that they lack the ability to discern the incompleteness of the information packets they serve to their customers. Information is incomplete, and this drowns our population in ignorance, which enables manipulation.
By whom?
Sarah, no one entity is the master manipulator, if that's what you're asking. It's more like everyone in the media manipulates information and disclosure. It's all part of the drama that causes people to turn to the media for their answers, and citizens are responsible for this state of affairs because they don't demand that their educational centers secure clear, full disclosures of information and distribute it to the public domain.
Are you saying that our schools and universities should be the stewards of this information, and not the media?
In the ideal world, yes. This is how the core team designs their information structures. The educational centers dominate the distribution of information through a collective and well-reasoned system of journalism. The journalists are specialists across the disciplines of theology, the arts and sciences, government, business, and technology. These journalists document the best practices of each and every discipline and share this information through full disclosure. Nothing is left out. The research is meticulous and completely untouched by the political spectrum of special interests.
Okay, being a journalist myself, we've finally hit on a topic I know something about. When I was a beat reporter, I never felt the hand of politics influencing how or what I reported. I know at the national level, particularly reporting in DC, that might not be entirely the case, but the stories we've been talking about the past few nights weren't even on my radar screen. That's the real problem. These stories are completely secreted away. And given that our politicians don't even know about the existence of the ACO and all of the other things affiliated with it, how can you blame the politicians, or the media for that matter?
I didn't intend to blame anyone, really. The system is imperfect. Anyone involved in the system knows that it's larger than life and can't be changed by one person or even one group of people. The media know their limits, and they know their markets. People want to know the truth about the things that affect them in their pocketbook. The regions of cosmology, ETs, the ACO, and things that go bump in the night are considered light reading to the masses, reserved for entertainment, not serious news.
This is anything but light news, and you know it. Why do you sound so cynical?
If I'm cynical about the media, it's not for you to take personally. I'm of a mind that the media will not change significantly until the education system changes significantly and produces students that demand more than news, dramas, sports, and weather.
So our schools should not only produce students with an appetite for cosmology, but they should also produce the news? Pretty tall orders for schools, don't you think?
Perhaps, but it's what's needed before the ACO or any related organization would share its knowledge with the masses.
And why is that?
Academia would absolutely be turned on its head if the ACO stepped forward and provided its research findings, technologies, and evidence of ET interactions. It would be attacked. And it would be a vicious attack. At least that was 15's intractable conclusion. The ACO, therefore, had no other way to bring its findings to the public than through the private sector and the alliances it had with the NSA's Special Projects Laboratory.
Give me an example of something, a technology or discovery, that was first uncovered by the ACO and then exported to the private sector.
The transistor would be a good example.
You're telling me that the ACO invented the transistor?
No, Bell Labs invented the transistor, but the ACO worked with Bell Labs, or more specifically, Mervyn Kelly, who ran its operations in the mid-1950s. Mr. Kelly had attached a rather brilliant physicist to this project by the name of Bill Shockley, who became aware of the outermost edges of the ACO.
How'd that happen?
A little-known fact, Mr. Shockley, working with a friend of his, invented the world's first nuclear reactor. The Defense Department heard about it through Mr. Kelly, and wanted it badly. This was before the Manhattan Project got underway. Mr. Kelly wanted a patent for the discovery, but the government threw up every conceivable roadblock. They kept the whole discovery under complete confidentiality and negotiated to have one of our scientists work with Mr. Shockley in secret.
When was this?
This was happening in 1944 and 1945.
Why did our government squabble about the patents?
They knew Mr. Shockley could play a role in the war, and they wanted to use this as leverage to secure his commitment to help. He was a difficult man to work with, so I was told. He never stepped forward and volunteered to do anything unless he knew it would somehow benefit him. So, our government held the patents up until he would enlist.
And did he?
Yes.
And how did it benefit him?
There was, within our government, a newly formed intelligence agency. It was the forerunner of the NSA. It was known as the General Services Special Projects Laboratory, and to this day, very little is known all about it. The SPL was later folded into the NSA in 1953 as an unacknowledged department, and ultimately the ACO was folded into the SPL as an unacknowledged research laboratory. So, the ACO was 2 levels deep, or what is called Blackroot.
What was the motivation for all the security? The war?
It may surprise you, but the war wasn't of great concern to the forces that the ACO were dealing with. The concern was ETs and who would be able to first utilize their technology in military applications. In the early 1940s, UFO sightings were quite common, even more so than today. And our government was convinced that these sightings were real and that they were indeed off-planetary forces. They wanted two things: steal the technology from downed spacecraft, or establish an alliance. They weren't too particular about which way it happened.
But how did all of this pertain to Shockley?
I got off track a bit. Mr. Shockley was introduced to the SPL and was made privy to many of the secret initiatives of the SPL. If not for his personality traits, he would have been recruited to join the SPL. He was that brilliant. Anyway, he was given access to some of the research in field effect transistors that was underway within the SPL. This was before the Bell Labs discovery of the joint transistor, which was made by colleagues of Mr. Shockley. Mr. Shockley was allowed to utilize some of the research within the SPL to create his own version of the field effect transistor and become widely known as its inventor. This was done in exchange for his cooperation in helping Army and Navy strategic operations during the war. He was aware of the SPL and knew part of their agenda, and I was told that he wanted to join the SPL after the war because of its superior laboratories, but again, his personality traits prevented his admission.
So, Bell Labs receives the patent for the transistor in exchange for Shockley's assistance with the war. What exactly did he do that was so important?
I don't know for certain, but in general, his role was helping to optimize weapons deployment.
What was the role of the NSA during all of this?
The NSA wasn't in existence until November 1952. During this time, the SPL and ACO were the two most advanced, secretive labs in existence. And they each had only one private sector lab they worked with, Bell Labs. And this is because Mr. Kelly was a friend with the executive director of the SPL.
So what was the relationship between the SPL and ACO?
You mean in the 1940s?
First, how far back does it go?
The SPL was formed in 1938. There was a strong development, particularly throughout Europe, in fission energy. The SPL was initially conceived to examine fission as an alternative energy source as well as its possible military applications.
Why was it kept so secret?
In the late 1930s there was significant political unrest in Europe, and the US wasn't sure whom it could trust. It had a notion that fission was the answer to superior technical warfare, and didn't want to share it unwittingly. It was also alarmed at some of the sudden advances that were taking place in the European physics community, and felt it needed to concentrate some of its best resources to equip a world-class laboratory, and staff it with some of the best minds of the planet.
How could the best minds of the planet suddenly be plucked up by the US government and not be noticed by the scientific community? I mean, how do you keep this a secret?
They didn't take established leaders in the field of physics. They sought out the young, budding geniuses that were still relatively unknown, but under the right guidance and with the best available technology, could produce something extraordinary.
Like the transistor?
Like the transistor.